New Explorer Corps, First Arm, Spinward Operations Area, 3 jumps outside the Entelos system. November 24th, 3151. Captain Rin Barrett stared out of one of the dropship Alalia's bridge windows and scowled at the possibilities ahead of her. They were in an orbit around a moon completely dwarfed by its gas giant planet. The dropship was being buffeted by radiation from the planet, but what concerned Rin at the moment was the yellow-brown swirling atmosphere blanketing the moon's surface. Somewhere under thick clouds tainted by sulfuric acid was the HPG station that was still operating. This was exactly the sort of thing her investors would want her to investigate. "What do we know?" Rin asked the room when she turned to look at the holotable. The comms officer replied, "Well, you're not going to want to build a vacation home down there. We're looking at a surface temperature of around 50 Celsius, and those clouds are roughly half water. The rest is a mixture of phosphorus, sulfur, and a bunch of other chemicals that are hostile to life." Why on earth would anyone build a hyperpulse generator there? Rin asked herself before sighing. Her eyes turned back toward the view of the moon through the glass. She added, louder this time, "Unless they didn't want anyone to visit." "Captain, we have an incoming communications link from the moon," the comms officer stated. "Bring it up," Rin said, curious now that there was proof of life down there. Or proof of something, anyway. "This is Persephone Station," the computer-generated voice continued. "Your ship is not recognized and not welcome. Leave, or you will face the full might of Comstar." Rin responded into the comm mic in her command chair. "This is Captain Rin Barrett. I'm leading the New Explorer Corps mission, and we seek only peace." There was nearly 10 seconds of silence before the digitized voice repeated the original message word for word. "Comstar," Rin said breathlessly before tapping her mic to pull up the Alalia's internal comlink. "We've made contact with something down at the HPG, so we're headed down. Olivia and Akif, I want you and your mechs and ready to stomp the second we land." "Aye, Captain," Olivia's voice returned, with Akif's coming shortly after. As the dropship started to change course and begin its descent into the tumultuous atmosphere of the moon, Rin tried to contain her excitement at the prospect of getting to see some genuine Comstar technology. Who knew what the site could contain? There didn't seem to be any bite behind the bark of this digital message, so it's likely the site was abandoned long ago and the security system turned on to scare away looters and pirates. As the Eulalia settled down on the rough ferrocrete, Rin stood on the decking of the ship's bridge and held her breath. Surrounding the ship was a wind-swept complex consisting of 3 buildings constructed from poured ferrocrete that looked like they had been there for ages. In the distance, beyond the edges of the yellow haze in the atmosphere, stood a battle mech, which was hard to identify. Rin let her Mechwarriors know to keep an eye on it as they started to disembark. Olivia's Thunderbolt stepped down the ramp first. Its white paint job was tinted yellow in the caustic atmosphere. Akif's Calliope followed shortly after, scanning for any possible threats. Olivia furrowed her brow. The dark brown skin of her hands contrasted with the light gray of the Thunderbolt's control sticks as she pushed the mech forward toward the mech in the distance. Closing on it, the haze thinned and she opened up the comlink with the captain. "This Battlemaster looks like it's 1,000 years old. It's more of a crumbling statue than a mech," she said as she looked at the rusted mess standing motionless on the tarmac. "All right, let's check the buildings and see if there's anyone home," Rin said into her mic as she put on her environmental protection suit in the cargo bay along with a couple of the science team members. Olivia and Akif moved their mechs around the tarmac looking for threats. Everything looked so incredibly old. The building ferrocrete looked like the surface of the moon pelted with meteorites. With the visibility of only a few hundred meters, the site seemed to be surrounded by a mustard yellow fog. Rin and the team rolled down the dropship ramp in an open-top 4-wheel drive vehicle toward the closest building, which looked like it was still intact, though the large metallic doors looked completely rusted over. Rolling to a stop, the 4 exited the vehicle and began to take readings, measurements of the building, and look for evidence that might hint as to who had might been the last occupant. When Rin walked up to the large hangar doors, it was obvious that they were not going to open on their own. She nudged some of the flaking rusted metal away with her boot before tapping her mic. "Akif, can you come over here and knock on the door for us?" "Sure thing, Captain. How gentle?" Akif asked as he marched the 40-ton Calliope toward the building. Rin walked back toward the jeep and away from the doors as she replied, Hard enough to make a mark, but not so hard that we don't get invited back. With all the grace a gigantic war machine could muster, the Calliope's right leg kicked out and thudded into the large doors. A wall of rusted metal fell away and cascaded down to the ferrocrete. The sound was intense, like a ringing bell, and Rin was glad that her environmental suit muffled it considerably. As Akif brought his foot back for another kick, Rin grabbed her laser pistol from the front passenger seat of the vehicle. The second kick punctured the doors, which shuddered and split apart under that impact. Olivia's laughter cut across the comms as Akif struggled to pull his mech's foot from the hole it had created. "Can't take you anywhere in that thing," she chuckled. "Keep your eyes open. This place might look 1,000 years old, but we have no idea what..." Rin's warning was cut off the second after Akif pulled his mech's foot from the hole in the doors. The unmistakable blue artificial lightning of a PPC shot smacked into the mech's retreating foot, knocking Akif off balance and sending the mech crashing to the ferrocrete. Rin waved the science team back, sending them scurrying back around the corner of the building as she pulled her pistol and followed them. Quick to laughter as well as fury, Olivia growled into the comms as she unleashed her Thunderbolt 10S's PPC and large lasers fury into the door, which ignited and then melted under the tremendous heat. Normally her mech would have been able to handle that heat of the combined shot, but here on this moon, with the temperature already outside the limits of what could keep a human alive, Olivia's cockpit was instantly sweltering. She cursed and fired her missiles into the gaping hole she just created, hoping to hit, or at least humble, whoever dared to fire at her comrade. Most of the missiles impacted the damaged doors, opening the hole wider. A few missiles did streak in, causing a rumble of explosions inside that Rin could feel through the side of the building she was now leaning against. Rin yelled into the comm, "Hold fire! Stay out of the LOS. I don't want to blow the whole place apart." "Aye, Captain," Olivia said as she sidestepped the Thunderbolt and moved alongside Akif away from the gaping holes in the doors. The sound of fires burning in the doorway was muffled by her suit, and things went quiet. No additional fire was coming from inside the building, so she told the science team to stay put while she crept alongside the doors to the opening Akif had kicked in them. It was dark inside, and when she peeked in, she couldn't make out much beyond the usual gear and occasional crate that typically litters a hangar. A second peek, longer this time, helped Rin's eyes adjust a bit to the darkness. She saw what looked like a turret set up near the back of the hangar, surrounded by sandbags. Not wanting to be incinerated by a PPC blast, Rin ducked back and tapped her mic. Akif moved the Calliope around the corner of the structure. The mech's foot was charred from the PPC hit it took, and Rin knew he would want a little payback. The captain fed him the approximate height and distance from the back wall of the hangar, so he'd know where to fire. Roughly 3 meters away from the back corner, he turned his mech and dropped to one knee, lining up the plasma rifle with the approximate location of the turret. He wiped his olive-skinned brow before firing the weapon, which sent a blazingly hot chunk of plasma into the wall of the structure. The ferrocrete melted almost instantly. A second shot through the hole he created disappeared into the darkness, and Akif waited as the captain peeked in again. The turret was now a smoldering, half-melted mess of ruined metal and electronic parts. It was also a light source that lit up the back half of the hangar. On Rin's second look, she lingered and then stepped inside and away from the light coming in from the busted doors. Finally able to really see, the hangar looked empty except for those scattered crates, some myomer cabling, and a turret surrounded by sandbags. However, when she called the all clear and Olivia used her Thunderbolt's hand to rip open the doorway further, she noticed there was something odd about the sandbags. Creeping closer, her pistol out in hand, Rin moved closer to the smoldering turret. The hole in the doors was finally large enough, and Akif stepped his mech into the hangar to provide cover, scanning the room with his plasma rifle. Olivia worked on the doors after that in order to wedge the Thunderbolt inside as well. Stepping close, Rin realized the sandbags were actually people. Well, the remains of what used to be people. Their desiccated and mummified bodies looked as if they had been dead a very long time in the heat of the hangar and the outside world. Rin crouched down and looked at their tattered uniforms. On their shoulders was the unmistakable symbol that made her blood run cold. "What is it, Captain?" Olivia asked, looking down at Rin from her mech's cockpit. "Word of Blake. Mu Iota. I've seen these patches before, but only in history ROMs. What the hell was the Word of Blake doing out here?" Rin asked, looking at the other bodies in the circle. they either all died in a circle like this or were placed here. Either way, this is bizarre. That's usually the correct word for anything word of Blake, right, Captain? Akif asked. Usually, Rin replied, reaching into the jacket of the nearest dead Blakist, finding his pockets completely empty. When she moved on to the next body, it was also completely devoid of any possessions. Standing up, Rin holstered her pistol and looked over the smoldering turret. It's possible they left this thing on auto-fire before they died. One last gift for the next person to walk through those doors? Rin frowned, disappointed that this HPG station was sullied by whatever the Blakists did here. The team finished the search of the hangar, finding the crates were empty, likely holding the parts of the destroyed turret. Now open to the elements, the bodies began to decay in the highly caustic atmosphere. Even the patches with the sword and the MI lettering began to disintegrate. It would have been disturbing, but Rin and the team were already on their way to the next building, and no one would witness the obliteration of the last act of this Word of Blake unit. In the next building, much smaller, Rin tugged on a heavily corroded steel door, trying to get inside, but it wouldn't budge. She pulled out her laser pistol, which was a special design with 3 barrels arranged in a manner that the 3 shots would gradually spread out. This quasi-shotgun effect resulted in a triangle of misery for the target. At 5 meters, each shot would be roughly 3 inches apart. Rin wasn't a marksman and appreciated the additional chance to hit whatever it was she was shooting at. This time, the bolts bored through the rusted metal of the door's lock, and with a firm tug, the door opened and then fell completely off its hinges. The captain had to step back to avoid being crushed by the falling steel. Akif, you're on watch. Olivia, I could use you down here, Rin said, peeking into the dark interior. Promises, promises, Olivia said, setting her thunderbolt up as if it were watching over the building before climbing out of her command chair and slipping into her environmental suit. A couple of minutes later, she had crawled down the Mech's ladder and joined Rin at the doorway. Rin told the science team they could work outside until she sensed the all clear. They busied themselves as Rin and Olivia headed inside, each armed with a pistol and flashlight. The pair entered the building and were quickly confronted by a corpse leaning against the wall at the top of a set of stairs. It was in slightly better shape than those in the hangar, but not by much. In its bony, shriveled fingers was a directional charge. Olivia stepped between Rin and the explosive out of instinct, but it quickly became clear that it wasn't something about to go off. It, like everything else, looked ancient and inert. Olivia checked it anyway, making sure there were no leads heading out to cords that someone might nudge. Then they headed downstairs, pistols and flashlights pointing out into the darkness below. New Explorer Corps, First Arm, Spinward Operations Area, 3 jumps outside the Antelos system, Rabbit's Foot, Chimishu Class Jump Ship, November 24th, 3151. Cal Levitt leaned against the holotable in shock as he looked at the science team video from the site. Even now, so many years after the rampaging horror they caused, the involvement of Word of Blake at this site made his hair stand on end. Those zealots were responsible for countless billions of deaths and the ruination of worlds across the inner sphere. For many, there was no better example of pure chaotic evil than the Word of Blake. This time, it was Levitt sighing before he keyed up the comm down to the Holtz in the flight bay. Hey, Holtz, not a direct concern, but let's make sure you're ready to go if needed, he said out of an abundance of caution. The Blakists might be dead, but he didn't want to assume anything at this point. Always are, Captain, Ariana responded into the comlink. The aerospace pilot was crouched under the wing of her Corax, replacing one of the medium lasers with the help of one of the techs. With a few more ratchet turns, the job was done and she could take a break. Her father was taking his 4 hours off in his bunk, so that gave her time to run the place. It had been just the two of them for a very long time since her mother died from cancer back on Bithynia in the Capellan Confederation. She wasn't old enough to remember her mom, but her father took the loss really hard. He gave up his company and decided to take Ariana on an adventure. 13 years later, she earned her wings, and ever since, the two of them have had little trouble finding work flying security for merchant vessels. For the most part, it was a pretty low-effort job. Trouble only sprang up occasionally, and it was never anything her father and Ariana couldn't handle. It was a good life, and Ariana was happy that her father found a new purpose. Getting to fly around and live the mercenary life was exciting. How many girls back in Bithynia could say they had flown an aerospace fighter in the periphery? Ariana ran her fingers through her short brown hair, suddenly in the mood for something with caffeine in it, especially if there was a remote possibility of some action. She set her tools down on the cart and walked over to the little kitchenette built into the corner of the flight deck. She was rummaging through the fridge there for something to drink when May, one of the Mechwarriors, popped into her comm line. "Hi, it's May. Do you know anything about a hardware upgrade? I was just working on my mech and the tablet rebooted, saying it was installing an update," May's voice said. Ariana grabbed a can of something that might possibly be tea and popped the top before responding. "Nothing down here. Did you ask your techs up there?" "They said to check with you down here," May replied. "I'd kick it up to Lieutenant Levitt and see if there's something going on," Ariana said after draining the can. New Explorer Corps, First Arm, Spinward Operations Area, 3 jumps outside the Intello system, November 24th, 3151. Olivia scanned for any possible threats as the two reached the bottom of the stairway, which looked to be 4 or 5 floors down. At the bottom, the temperature was more bearable, though the darkness didn't agree with her at all. She much preferred the high perch of her Thunderbolt looming over whatever she was shooting at, or stomping on. Rin put on a good show, but Olivia knew that the laser pistol she carried had never been used on a human being. You could always tell with these science geeks that if nonsense did go down, their shots would be wild. Then again, she did come up with a nifty way to deal with that turret. As they reached the end of that long, blown ferrocrete hallway, Olivia took the lead, entering what ended up being a large central control room for an HPG station. Both Rin and Olivia looked up in awe at the bank of large screens on the wall, electronic connections strung around the floors, and a single glowing computer screen sitting among many more that were off. Everything except that one glowing screen looked like it hadn't functioned in decades, if not centuries. Olivia scanned the room out of habit, just keeping her pistol handy. Rin walked over to the computer screen and tapped on the dusty keyboard in front of it. The glowing green screen flashed, then rolled through a series of processes that showed a login prompt. "We'll need the science team down here to crack this. Let's get them down here," Rin said, eager to find out what secrets the system might still be holding. She was almost giddy at the prospect of getting her hands on some of the hard drives in the room. The information they could be holding might make the Combine and Wolves happy for a long time. Olivia walked the room, making sure there were no hidden traps or surprises waiting for the science techs. When she reached the front of the room, in the corner farthest away from the door, she paused and aimed her flashlight at a corpse seemingly halfway stuffed into an open air vent. While obviously not the first body she'd seen today, this one was different because it was wearing a Comstar uniform, and there was a large bullet hole in the mummified man's forehead. "You better come check this out, Captain," Olivia said, kneeling and examining the body. When Rin walked up, she too knelt down. "Sure doesn't look like he was with the others," Rin said, noticing something in the palm of the man's left hand. When she peeled the fingers back, with a rather disgusting series of cracks, she saw he was holding a folded piece of paper. It was a piece of Comstar stationery with a hastily scrawled note on it that read, "I'm honored to have served, and that the rest of my team was able to escape before they came. I did my duty until the end, but fear what might be done when they get down here. I'm going to try to hide in the vents and see if I can disable the HPG permanently. At least then they'll be as stuck as I am." "Well, doesn't look like he was successful," Olivia said while standing back up. "Partially, it seems, considering the Blakeists do seem to have ended up stranded," Rin said as she rifled through his pockets, finding some knickknacks, a wallet, a lighter, and a flash drive. She stuffed all of the items into her satchel and stood up. "No ship, though," Olivia said as she looked around the room again. "That means they were left here on purpose by someone." The science team entered the room and eagerly began to set up on the desks and at the working computer. Rin walked over and said, "I want to know how this thing was still pulling data after so long. I bet our employers would love to have knowledge of that kind of automation." "Yes, ma'am," said the nearest tech, who was already working on cracking the computer login. Others were pulling out computers, unscrewing the cases, and pulling hard drives as quickly as they could. "I need to talk to Levitt and make sure he knows we're in one piece," Rin said, heading toward the hallway. "Can you babysit them, Olivia?" Olivia chuckled, rolled her eyes, and responded, "At my rate, you're getting ripped off for babysitting services." Rin was so excited by the possibility of digging through Comstar data that she had to excuse herself. She practically bounded up the stairs with a grin ear to ear. At the top, she walked out into the miserable swirling yellow haze and waved up at a Keith who swayed the Calliope's rifle in return. "Levitt, we've found something potentially big here at the HPG. If we can sort out how it's still up and running, that'll be the key for more funding." It's finally coming together. I can't wait to see what is on these hard drives, Rin said, her voice giving away her enthusiasm. Due to distance, the response came several minutes later. Levitt's voice crackled a bit from the interference from the atmosphere and the radiation from the gas giant nearby. It said, "Glad you're having fun. Let's not dawdle. The ship's ready to go, and I'd hate to have to take over should you decide to become a permanent resident down there. We're making progress and should be packing up soon. If you abandon us, you're going to have to deal with payroll, and I know how much you love accounting," Rin retorted. Back downstairs, the science techs were packing drives into their bags while the one at the working computer was finally cracking the login. Olivia watched from a short distance away, over the shoulder, as the science tech quickly sought to image the computer's drive onto a clean drive on the desk in front of him. After a few moments of data transfer, the screen flashed, catching the attention of almost everyone in the room. Then, some speaker in the room began to read a statement in a digitized voice. It said, "People of the Inner Sphere, citizens of the thousands of planets settled by mankind. Once you were united under the Star League, but for 300 years savage wars have consumed your worlds. Until a new enemy appeared, mysterious invaders known as the clans. Powerful and ruthless, they struck like lightning, driving a wedge deep into the Inner Sphere. They made one mistake. They threatened hallowed Terra and had to face the warriors of Blessed Blake. In the spirit of the Star League, ancient foes reunited and we took the fight to the enemy's homeworlds. Citizens of the Inner Sphere, beware. Your leaders have betrayed you in this moment of triumph. Together we stood in the eye of the golden future the third transfer would have ushered in. But when the time came, your leaders faltered, once more letting their own petty weaknesses and jealousies rip apart one of mankind's greatest achievements. Now the Master comes, bearing the torch of Blake's wisdom. See the light and revive the Star League, or face the cleansing fire as we burn away the corruption of those who have betrayed us. The peace of Blake be with you." When the voice stopped, everyone in the control room sat in silence for a few moments, taking in the message from the past. "Finish up, people," Olivia said in an effort to wake the science team from their stunned stupor. The tech at the computer was barely turned back toward it when the screen flashed and then went dark. "Well, that's ominous. We're done, people. Get your crap and get going," Olivia ordered, increasingly uncomfortable with being in this mausoleum of Word of Blake's madness. 2 minutes later, they were all topside, and Olivia yelled at Rin that they were leaving. Unused to taking orders from her crew, Rin was taken back for a moment before nodding and getting into the vehicle that raced toward the dropship. Climbing the rungs for the Timberwolf's ladder, Olivia cursed the whole way. The last thing she wanted was to have any connection to that murderous cult. All of the houses of the Inner Sphere went out of their way to wipe out any trace of the Word of Blake years ago, and now there were satchels full of hard drives full of who knows what. An hour later, Eulalia was lifting off from the surface on plumes of smoke and plasma from the engines. As it finally slipped from the gravity of the sulphurous moon, Olivia marched up to the bridge to confront her captain. When she walked in, the satchels full of drives were sitting next to the holotable. "Captain, that place was tainted by the Word of Blake. If anyone finds out we have their tech, we'll be everyone's target," she sternly spoke at Rin. The captain was reviewing the words of a recorded message, replaying them on the holotable, and pondering the significance of every word. She didn't react to Olivia's statement. Olivia was about to yell it again this time, when Rin wiped away the table and said, "We're fine. The drives will be checked for useful scientific and geographic information and then destroyed. This is why we're here, Mechwarrior. We need to be flexible and take advantage of opportunities like this to learn our history." "Our history?" Olivia asked with a raised eyebrow. "The history of the Inner Sphere," Rin clarified. "If we get painted as Word of Blakeists for having this, we won't have any safe port for the rest of our lives. We'll be hunted for sport," Olivia stated plainly, firmly crossing her arms over her chest. "That won't happen. We're going to pull the data and transfer it to the Combine and the Wolves. They want this info. That'll be the end of it," Rin said confidently, with more authority. She added, "That's all, Mechwarrior." "Yes, ma'am," Olivia said in a flat tone, turning on her heels and marching out of the Eulalia's bridge. Finally taking a breath, Rin let out a long sigh, hoping that what she just explained was the truth. Lieutenant Levitt's voice interrupted the moment with a question from the Rabbit's Foot. He asked, "Captain, did you notice the HPG link went down? Please say that wasn't your doing." Sort of, came Rin's reply. She looked out at the windows, at the gas giant in the distance, feeling an optimism she hadn't felt since the expedition started. She expected a snarky response, but none came. The comms link with the rabbit's foot's down, Captain. End Part 5. I hope you're enjoying the story so far as we get to know our characters and work through the crew's first jumps into the periphery. I'm looking forward to sharing what happens next. Big thanks to those who consistently comment, offer input, and encouragement as we build something cool and what I consider a team effort. If you want to support the creation of future content on the channel, likes and subscribes are great, and a big thank you to the Ko-Fi crew named above. I really appreciate your support. Take care, and go make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.